alumni with us for our panel discussion this evening. And so this event has been a staple of Global Week for the past many, many years. And we're glad to be able to continue it, albeit somewhat different form and focus during this most unusual October that we're all experiencing.
Yes, agreed. We're really glad that you all can be here. If you don't mind toggling back to the other slide, Kylie, about Global Week, we just wanted to let you all know a little bit about what's happening. There's lots of events taking place throughout the rest of this week, lots of events, opportunities, and occasions to engage with global themes and learn about international initiatives at UVA, and this is just one of many. This full schedule of events are available here on the Global Week website. It's a pretty easy link to memorize, but you can also obviously Google it. And we hope all the offerings really inspire you to keep thinking about how to integrate global into your education at the university, because there are so many ways to do that. So before we get too far into our program, we want to take a minute to introduce ourselves. My name is Drema Johnson, and I'm a career counselor in the Central Career Center office at UVA. I work with students interested in exploring global careers and experiences. My hope is to help you understand why this is an area of interest of yours and how to connect your why to where you will go and what you will do. I also work closely with many of our alumni who live outside of the United States, who love to talk to current students about their career ideas and goals. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you can connect to those folks. So I'll turn it over to Ingrid.
So I'm so happy to know that you all are out there and intrigued by the idea of an international applied learning experience. My name is Ingrid Hakala, and I serve as the director of UVA Global Internships in the International Studies Office. And I work with all aspects of our global internship programs, including developing and instructing the academic courses that are associated with them. And it's just really fulfilling for me to get to know each year's group of global interns. It's gotten to be a bigger community over time, but it's always full of the most interesting students, and I'm really glad that you think about joining us. So to get started, for the last many years, we've titled this event Securing a Global Internship, but truthfully, that's only a portion of what we want you to focus your attention on. I think the words global and internship are both very enticing in their own ways, and they're often at the top of people's minds when they think about having an applied international experience. But what we ultimately want you to think about and to underline through this event is just how many different types of experiences you can have in an international context which are meaningful and which can provide opportunities for growth and development of transferable, marketable skills. So you don't just have to think about internships. You can also realize you can do research, which is faculty-led, independent, or part of a formal research exchange. You can engage in a fellowship, sign up for a field school, add a practica to your study abroad program, volunteer, whether in Charlottesville or abroad, do an actual internship with an organization that's actually feels more like field work in practice, or then actually work in a formal professional environment. So it's really ultimately, we think more about the attitude of learning that you bring to an experience rather than what exactly it's called. And so, okay, then there's the elephant in the virtual room. The health and safety. We're all having to cope with a very different world than we ever could have imagined for ourselves. And global travel has been totally disrupted, and conditions continue to evolve in very uncertain ways, which means that our present abilities to predict what's going to be possible for in-person education abroad activities remains seriously challenged. So the health and safety of UVA students are always going to be of top priority to us, and university staff are constantly monitoring conditions and trying to make the wisest determinations they can. So travel abroad for UVA students for UVA or university-related purposes is currently restricted through the spring term. We are making plans currently for summer, and we'll have to see what's going to be possible, but we are making plans. And so please see the website that's listed here for up-to-date and comprehensive information about where we are with all of that. And we'll be thinking about experiences abroad broadly and not specifically about what's going to be possible for this coming summer in this presentation.
Thanks, Ingrid. So talking a little bit about what we'll cover today, keeping a broad outlook about applied international learning experiences, our plan for this virtual session is to very briefly highlight some of the pathways you might follow to secure an international applied learning experience for yourself. We're going to have particular focus on some of the units at UVA that you can connect with more specifically, so that you can learn a little bit more about some of those areas and resources. We're then going to move right along to the main purpose of the event, which is hearing directly from several alumni of programs and opportunities abroad about their international experiences. We'll hear a little bit about what they've learned, how they got everything sorted out, such as actually obtaining the experience, and also how they've reflected on it and what impact it's made on their future decisions around career or academic goals. And we will lead with some questions, but we will also have time at the end for your own questions. So if you would like to put some questions in the chat, or if you would like to be thinking now about questions you have for these alumni of these different study abroad or internship abroad programs, this is a good time to reflect on that.
Great. So in outlining some of the pathways to an applied experience abroad, I guess we'll start with the Education Abroad Division of the International Studies Office, which is also known as ISO. It's located in normal times on the second floor of Minor Hall. All university-related travel, student travel goes through the ISO at one point or another, so it's a good hub to know about. And global internships is a unit of education abroad in the ISO itself. The ISO also manages all international students and scholar relations and matters as well. So over the years, we've developed in the ISO two main types of internship abroad experiences for students. There are UVA global internship programs and what we call independent global internships. And both of these types of experiences are academic in nature, so they're attached to UVA courses and credit, and they typically take place during the summer term, because that's when most UVA students are considering going abroad for these kinds of experiences. The programs themselves are cohort-based with matters like housing and timelines structured into each program plan. And they're all a little bit different in terms of the curriculum and the types of internships that are on offer. And so these programs are often the result of cross-university partnerships, such as the IPP global programs in Dublin and Prague, which you'll hear a bit about from Landon, one of our alumni. And in normal years, there are programs in 6 countries all over the world. And due to the change in global conditions over the last year, we've also started with our own virtual global internship programs, and we're excited to be able to offer positions with a few of our closest partner organizations in the upcoming spring 2021 semester and next summer as well. And you will also hear about that from Karina, who's one of our panelists. And then finally, UVA independent global internships are a bit different than programs in that you would travel abroad alone or with a small group of UVA peers for an internship that's arranged directly with a partner organization. So, these are these are different types of experiences that, that require different levels of independence um, and, and different types of application processes. And then additionally, we just think it's really important for you to know that UVA has developed so many really fascinating faculty-led education abroad programs, which includes strong applied learning experiences. So there are far too many for me to list out now and highlight, but you can do a field school in global public health in South Africa. You could do an engineering research exchange at a university in South Korea, add a practica as a add-on to your study abroad program in Valencia, and more. So there's a lot there. And even if you don't find a match between the type of applied learning experience you'd like to have and the location you'd like to travel outside of the US amongst UVA's programs, the chances are really high that you can find an outside of UVA academic program that would suit you. So there are many UVA students who do this each year, and they apply for transfer credit for their terms abroad. So to find all of these different types of programs, now is a really good time to be looking into all of that. You can do a program search on the Education Abroad website and play around with the program type search parameter. So there you can look for internships, for field schools, for lots of different things. And so I would just encourage you to do that, and you'll see that you can go pretty much anywhere you want to and do a lot of different things.
So in addition to the breadth of programs that the Education Abroad office offers that Ingrid just shared, as well as some of the individual faculty partnerships, there are also units at UVA that offer or facilitate applied learning abroad opportunities. So the ones listed here, the Center for Global Health, the Office of Undergraduate Research, the Office of Citizen Scholar Development, and the Center for Global Inquiry and Innovation, are easy Google searches away from locating their websites and learning more about some of the different programs they offer. Many of them offer research grants for you to conduct your own research, or grants to conduct research that they help you set up in working with alumni abroad. There's just a lot of different applied learning cases that exist where you have a chance to plug in and be a part of even a bigger project that's being facilitated at UVA. Typically, we have these offices come to this event in person. We usually have a resource fair where you can shop around and get to meet some of the folks. But due to the nature of us being virtual, one of the best pieces of advice we can give is to, after this session, take a look at the websites of each of these offices and identify someone within the office that you could reach out to set up a phone call or a Zoom call with. And if you have questions about how to do that, that's part of the work that we do in the Career Center, is helping you connect to the right resources and finding the right people to understand what some of your interests are. In addition to that, we've talked a little bit about some of the more existing pathways at UVA, but there are also ways that are not facilitated by UVA. Many students secure their own internships abroad each year through various means, which may include personal or familial connections, following up with local employers who also have overseas offices, so think multinational companies. Searches via professional websites and databases like LinkedIn, as well as using our job and internship database, Handshake, which has quite a few international experiences, even being posted now. There are two databases, though, that I do want to point out to you, as I mentioned earlier, about alumni connections, to be able to connect with alumni. One is a platform you're probably at least have heard of, if not already familiar with, which is LinkedIn. The other is what is called our Virginia Alumni Mentoring Program, and it's through the Career Center. And both of these platforms have wonderful search engines that can give you access to alumni who might be working in a field of interest to you or in a region of the world of interest to you. And again, we're happy to help you navigate these platforms in the Career Center and help you to be able to connect with alumni who have lived or worked outside of their home country. In addition to that, what's not listed here, just kind of as another teaser, is there are 19 international alumni clubs abroad. And so that is another great network of people that we can help you tap into through our through the Office of Engagement and Alumni Involvement. In addition to that, I'll briefly mention some of the other icons that you see on this slide refer to resources that we pay for you to get access to for free that are located inside of Handshake. And these are databases such as Going Global, Handshake itself, where you can find out more information about specific countries or specific cities abroad and how to navigate an internship search process there. Again, I think one of the best ways that you can get started is actually visiting us for a virtual appointment, which you can schedule through Handshake, or coming to our virtual drop-ins, which are Monday through Friday, 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard, or soon to be Standard Time. And you don't need an appointment in advance. You simply sign on to our website, engage with our chat platform, and you'll be connected to a counselor, and we can talk with you about some of these resources more in depth. The last thing we will also mention that is part of one of the options you may consider for a international applied learning experience is the idea of a third-party agency, or agencies that you might find through search engines like goabroad.com or gooverseas.com. These are programs where you pay a third-party provider to help set up an experience for you. And so sometimes those are really great options for students. And one of the things that we help students do is vet them to see if they're the right fit, to make sure that you understand all of the costs and the quality of the program and the type of experience, as well as maybe connect you to other students who have used those platforms. Now, while we can't endorse any specific programs, we are more than happy to help talk with you about how you can advocate for yourself in that process if you want to choose that. And then last but not least, of course, cost may be one of many of your primary concerns when you're thinking about an experience abroad. Each of the pathways outlined do have different costs associated with it. Some are higher, some are lower. But our best advice to you is to do your research, to read brochures, talk carefully, to talk to staff here at the university about options, and ask questions. The more time that you take to kind of clarify what's out there, I think the better decision you're going to be able to make in the long run. And again, that's why folks like Ingrid and myself, as well as Kylie, who's on the call tonight, are in our offices, are to help you to be able to assess each of those opportunities for you. In addition to analyzing the cost, also know that there are some resources at the university where you can apply for grant funding if you were to secure something that is unpaid. Most of the grant funding options exist for unpaid internships that are in the usually public service affiliated space, and there are two that the Career Center oversees, the Parents Fund Internship Grant and the Larry Simpson Scholarship. Those deadlines happen in the spring semester, so usually that gives folks enough time to line something up for the summer and then be able to apply for funding. Ingrid's office, the UVA Global Internships office, also provides grants to financially needy students for its programs and independent internships. There are also education abroad scholarships you can apply for when submitting your applications. And the UVA units that we mentioned earlier, like the Center for Global Health, also, like I said, offer grants and scholarships, particularly in research, to help facilitate opportunities. And so again, I encourage you to reach out to our office if you want to talk more about what are the grant funding options out there. But that just know that there are mechanisms and that we want to be able to help you to identify those, because we don't want you to turn down an opportunity that might actually be a really good fit for you, and that there might actually be funding out there to support you.
And I'll just add there too, so there, the Career Center has a page on funding your internship, and the Global Internships web pages also have has a section on that. And then it's important to note, though, that if you do get any grant funding or scholarship funding from the university to support an internship abroad or research abroad, whatever type of experience you have, you are subject to the university's policy on student international travel. And so that will, in that case, you will have to follow by what the university tells you is safe for your health and security abroad. So just have that in your mind as well. So let's see. So now that I hope it's helpful to have a sense of some of the ways that you can secure these types of experiences abroad. There are so many different pathways, and it does take time to educate yourself about all of them. But we wanted to give you the chance to hear directly from students who've had these kinds of experiences, because they can certainly say best what such experiences meant to them. And we're really lucky, I think, to have panelists who are both very recent alumni of such experiences, and then ones who've had a bit longer to reflect upon them over time. So we have four current students and one prior student with us. So first is Karina Atkins, and so she is a third-year student. And doing a very interesting interdisciplinary major in anthropology, media studies, Middle Eastern and South Asian studies. This past summer, she was a participant in our first virtual global internship program and worked with this fascinating women's labor union in India called Seva Bharat. Then we also have Landon Holben, who is a fourth-year student majoring in foreign affairs and media studies. And Landon participated in the IPP Global Internship Program in the summer of, when was that? Summer 2019. And so Landon is kind of representing the UVA Global Internship Pathway, and can talk about his experience working with the Dublin City Council's Smart City Initiative and Enable Research Center. Then we also have Jessica Lynn with us, and so Jessica is an alumna of the engineering school of systems engineering from 2017. And she was on this panel a few years ago herself when she was still a student, but she's kind of representing the on her own global internship, like, taken a lot of initiative to make her internship happen for her in Sao Paulo, Brazil, with the University of Sao Paulo's engineering school. And currently Jessica is working as a program manager at engineering services at Amazon. And then finally, we also have Blair Smith, who is a fourth-year student, political and social thought, and Blair did his internship with an organization called Enseña Peru in Lima, and during the summer of 2019 as well. And at that point, or I guess that would still represent what we consider a UVA independent global internship. So it gives you a bit of a range of all of the different types of experiences that students will have. And so I guess I will let Drema start with some of our questions. We definitely have a lot of questions, but we'll leave room at the end for you guys to ask. And please, as we go along, just feel free to chat your questions as well too.
Yeah, exactly. Please, if you have questions to put in the chat, go for it, because that can help direct which ones we decide to lean on from our list. So could each of you explain where and with whom you worked and what you did?
I can get started, I guess. So hi, I'm Landon, as she had said. So I worked for Dublin City Council's Smart Dublin Initiative, which is a smart city program working to incorporate smart city technology And then I also worked in a second internship with Enable Research Center at Trinity College Dublin, which is also a smart city research center. And so for Smart Dublin, I worked a lot in data management and marketing for them. And then for Enable Research, I worked in business management and working on investment portfolios and that sort of thing.
Hi, I can go next. So like Ingrid said, I'm Karina and I worked for Sewa Bharat, which is a trade union, a pan-Indian trade union for women working in the informal sector. So whether that be domestic workers, street vendors, people working in the agricultural sector. And I worked with their research hub. So I would conduct interviews with women who were members of the trade union or working closely with members of the trade union, and then I'd come up with research questions and concept notes about areas that I thought it would be interesting for the trade union to look at further, and I'd also help them write their research reports up. And again, this is since I wasn't on the ground, I was doing it virtually. I couldn't really conduct the research myself, so it was a lot of asking questions, and then once people were on the ground and could get you do ethnographic research to get the answers to those questions, I'd kind of go back and help them write up reports about that stuff. So that's kind of my primary role.
I can go. Hi, I'm Blair. I use he, they pronouns. And like Ingrid said, I interned with Enseña Peru in Lima, Peru during the summer of 2019. So I was actually in Peru for the internship, and Enseña Peru is a nonprofit organization that's related to Teach for America. They train teachers and send them to under-resourced schools in Peru. So I was working with their administrative office on a research project in violence awareness and prevention. So I visited a couple of schools and interviewed teachers and students about their experiences with violence prevention. I also did some research with United Nations reports and got to go to different events like a UNESCO presentation on internal migration as well as migration from Venezuela and how conflicts between different ethnic groups surfaces in rural schools. I also worked on a fundraiser, an international fundraiser project for Enseña Peru's 10th anniversary.
Very cool. So my name is Jessica. I think, like Ingrid mentioned, mine was sort of a do-it-yourself internship, so it's slightly different. So what kind of triggered my experience was I had spent the second semester of my second year abroad doing a semester exchange program. And when I came back, I was just super jazzed about the international experience. I thought it was really cool and I wanted to do it again. I partnered with my research advisor or my, I guess, faculty advisor at the time in my major to kind of pursue other opportunities. I was actually looking to do another semester abroad, but found it a little bit difficult to do so third year of in the engineering school. So I think it was kind of a pivot, or we were just looking for opportunities to work abroad, and he had some connections in Brazil. And so I was able to kind of drive or connect some of those conversations and find stakeholders to help kind of approve the change in the ISO, kind of get the support needed to find the funding for this, and then also find a partnership between the University of Sao Paulo and UVA. So it kind of turned out a lot. I couldn't necessarily know the end result when we were kind of scoping out these conversations and I was working with my advisor, but in the end we were able to identify a specific team at the University of Sao Paulo that worked on automation research. And so for the 10 weeks that I spent in Brazil in the summer of 2016, I was primarily working with the port vendors. So we were out there kind of checking the containers and working on automation to make sure that the data that they were importing to the government was consistent and to their standards.
Great. So as you can see, that's quite a wide array of of things that people were doing. So much of these experiences is about the people that you meet, I think. And so I'm curious if some of you can tell us about a meaningful relationship that you forged in the course of your experience, and how did you achieve that kind of connection? And I know like for Karina in particular, her internship was virtual. So how did you do that?
Yeah, I think going into the virtual internship, I was scared that it would be a lot of independent work on my computer by myself, especially because of the time difference between New Delhi and Virginia. But I actually ended up becoming a morning person, and I'd wake up at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. over the summer for meetings with my internship supervisor and the other women who were working more closely on the ground, who I would interview all the time. And I ended up having like 2 to 4 meetings a week, actually, with women working at Sewa Bharat, and formed really close relationships with them. I'm actually still continuing my internship now into the semester. And my primary supervisor, the director of the research hub, is helping me with one of my papers for one of my classes, and we constantly, with everyone at Sewa Bharat, communicate over WhatsApp. And they're all distanced as well right now, because social distancing is not just something that's happening here. So it's kind of, I felt like I was very integrated into the folds of the organization as much as I could be, because it's not like everyone else was physically together. We were all working in this virtual environment, even though I was a little physically further away from them than they were from each other. And there were other interns with the organization who were college students going to college at different places in India. So I collaborated on a project with one of them over the summer, and we would send each other, like she'd send me her favorite Indian recipes and I'd send her my favorite American recipes, all over WhatsApp, and then we'd make them and share the recipes with each other. So I think it really it hasn't been that difficult, and it's been so wonderful to form these relationships with people living so far away, especially during this time. And I think what's made it nice, given in this virtual internship experience, is everybody is virtual right now, so you really don't feel that alienated or different, especially if you're thinking about it in the context of next semester or something like that. And I think ironically, I would never thought that it would be the case with a virtual internship. The thing that I've taken away and am the most grateful for is the relationship that I've made with the women at the trade union. So that really has not been a barrier for me. It's been kind of like the biggest highlight of the whole experience, which is really ironic but wonderful. So.
I think I can speak to the sort of cohort experience that you get with some of the UVA global internships. So IPP in Dublin, I went over with around 20 UVA students who are all third or second going into third year or fourth year. And, you know, we lived together. We all had internships throughout the city. And so with that, you know, I didn't know any of the people beforehand, but you really started to form really close bonds with everyone that you were with, because we would all come back from our internships every day and kind of talk about the new things that we did and what we liked, what we didn't like. You know, it was nice to sort of have those groups, and then within a month you end up traveling around Europe with these people on your off days. And so I think definitely, you know, made some really great friends there that I still am close with today. And so even outside of the networking, which also was great, you know, I made some people that when I came back to UVA, I had a bigger community of friends.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that too. It's just sort of my program, it wasn't a program prior to me creating it. And so I remember being like the only student and kind of being apprehensive of going abroad and not really being sure of what to expect. There really wasn't any precedent or anyone I could talk to who had done so before. But I would say it was really rewarding. It was really amazing, honestly, to go to Brazil and just see how welcoming people were. I think WhatsApp was a tool that they used a ton too. So being able to kind of connect with different people, I think I ended up being able to create 3 different circles. So I was a student at the University of Sao Paulo, but I was also working at a logistics company. So there was sort of of like the student aspect, and then there was also the kind of working environment. And then outside of that, I sort of had a host mom. So I was staying with a local person that someone from the faculty had recommended. So I was also kind of seeing how the day-to-day life was in terms of Brazilians and just like living their day-to-day lives in the city. So from the combination of those three, I think I was really able to build a lot of really rich relationships. And so specifically with the sort of supervisor I had when I was working, we've kept in touch over the past 3 years. And so even the year after I returned from Brazil, after my 4th year graduation, I actually ended up going to Lisbon to present some of the research we had published after the internship finished. And so I was in Portugal for a week to present that research, and kind of intermittently in the last few years, been connected. There still have been some other students that have gone through and sort of done more research, and so some more papers are in the works. And so it's been interesting to see some updates there, even years after I did the program.
Very cool. Thank you. We would love to hear from some of you all. A question came in, thinking back to before the internship when you were applying, but also maybe some reactions you heard from your supervisor in the internship. What would you say are some of the most important activities you were involved in at UVA or classes that helped you secure the opportunity?
One big thing for me was I lived in the Spanish house my 2nd year, which is like an immersive environment for language. And the program in Peru was, you pretty much required to speak Spanish. And it was really nice because I went with one person who wasn't quite as proficient in Spanish, and I was able to be a little bit of a bridge for her, being in like a bilingual residential environment before. But I'm a huge advocate for language houses because I think it's just a nice way to find community, also to plan different events. Like we hosted poetry nights and weekly dinners and tutoring things. And I made a lot of great friends from there, and also got to practice conversational Spanish and not just focused on like analyzing literary themes in novels, which I do in classes, which is also important. And the second main involvement that supervisors talked to me about later that caught their eye was my involvement in the LGBTQ Center at UVA. So I worked on developing a lot of programming that and managing sort of our volunteers in the space. And that kind of, I don't know, the self-starting initiative was important for them, especially because the independent internship is independent and requires the ability to be able to create projects and to sometimes to move people. So the person that I traveled with had completely different experiences though. So we were able to balance each other out a little bit. She had a better background in education and also did some kind of higher education stuff in the Career Center. So it was nice to get to share those experiences with the organization we were interning with.
I think for me, the biggest thing was that I knew, so I figured out that I was going to study abroad, or I was going to do my internship. At the time, I thought it was abroad, at the end of my fall semester. So when I was enrolling in classes, I made sure to enroll in a South Asian history class that just gave me, because I didn't really have much background knowledge on India, and it gave me kind of the background knowledge I needed to be successful in the internship. So if you're starting to think about what global context you want to engage in now, I'd recommend just taking a class on it, even if it's a survey class like I did, because I think it's really helpful to have some background on the history, if not language experience. And this semester I'm starting Hindi since I'm continuing my internship and eventually want to be able to like conduct interviews and do research myself. So just kind of making sure that you strategically pick your classes to inform your internship experience. It really enhanced it for me. So I know course registration is coming up now. So as you're also looking ahead to your summer plans, kind of think about how your classes can dovetail with those, because I also think that makes your classes way more engaging too, if like there's this ultimate end goal that they're going to help you get to or going to aid you in. So that's what I would recommend.
Um, well, oh gosh, I could just hear you guys talk all day long. This is so fascinating. So I'm interested, especially for some of you who maybe there's a little bit more time has passed between your internship and your present life now, but in what ways have you been able to apply some of the lessons and experiences that you had during your internship to your everyday life now? And I'm kind of virtually looking specifically at Jessica, who's been a working professional for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can kind of speak to, I think that me creating a global internship and I think doing a lot of scoping and kind of talking to stakeholders and trying to figure out like, how do we do so? I have an end goal, but I don't know how to get there. There's no precedent. Like, how do we get the right people engaged? How do I create some structure? How do I get partners internationally to support this change? I feel like this was largely the story that I used in my interviews that got me my first role at Amazon. So I think being able to show how you can create things from that didn't exist before, or really engage the right people to build something that can be sustained. I think those experiences have been really useful in terms of, I think, being able to show like a project or achievement from college. So I think personally, I think that was a really big piece of my interview kind of backlog that I used when I was looking for roles, and I think was a big piece of how I got my first job.
I think I can actually echo that a little bit, just in that every interview I've had in the last year and a half, the one thing they have all asked me is about Ireland. So that's been a really great conversation starter because I love to talk about it. So that makes interviews very easy. But at the same time, they're all very interested in the work I was doing, but then also just the fact that I did it in a global context. I feel like the interviewers have all put a lot of weight into the fact that it was something that, I did kind of out of my comfort zone a bit. And so, yeah, so I can definitely echo that.
Kind of building off that, Landon, of being out of your comfort zone, I wonder if some of you could talk about maybe a cross-cultural challenge that you faced in your experience and how you handled it.
So I'll give one anecdote, and this might border on stereotypical, and I don't think that it is true of all Peruvians, but there's this tradition in Peru of la hora peruana, which is Peruvian time, which means that like nothing starts on time. So being a person who like is, usually on time to things, and I like to get to things early, I really struggled to adjust to that at first. And there was one particular instance where I was supposed to visit a secondary school, and I was going with somebody else from the Enseña Peru office who told me to like meet her in front of a mall at 6 a.m. So that we could drive there together. I was like, okay, that's really early, but I'll do it. And so I got up at 5. I went to this mall and I was waiting outside. And when 6 came, like she wasn't there, and like 6:15 came and she wasn't there. 6:30 came, I like texted her, and she had ended up sleeping in a little bit. And so I truly was just like sitting or standing in front of this mall. It was like the sun was rising, and I just really had to practice patience in that moment and be like, this is okay. Like I was definitely safe. I checked in with the Enseña Peru professional at the school we were going to visit. So she knew that we were going to be late. So the time thing was a big adjustment, but we got around it, and yeah, definitely gave me a lot of like, appreciation for patience and like being okay with difficult things as they come up.
Are there other challenges that you all experienced in your internships that were kind of defining to the experience?
I don't know if I would really consider it too much of a challenge. Ireland is a very easy country to get accustomed to. They're all extremely nice and helpful. But I think for me, you know, I've never lived in a city of a couple million like Dublin. So just not even really culturally, but just that difference from, you know, living in suburbs or rural areas to living in a city and having to navigate a city all by myself. You know, that was definitely something I had to adapt to very quickly. We had about a week since we got there to sort of work on that navigation. And then the next week we were supposed to report into work. So I think definitely just getting accustomed to, you know, using their system of public transportation, which was pretty different than in most that I had gotten accustomed to here. And at the same time, I guess the Irish are very similar to people from Peru in that they aren't usually on time for a lot of things. And so getting used to the fact that maybe 7:30 really means 7:45 and getting used to that.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things was just the virtual environment was very challenging for me because while I think I was still able to make great relationships, I had never and still have never been to India before. So there was, I think, the cultural barrier felt a little bit more stark. And I think that I felt like there was less that I could contribute, just being even more of an outsider than I would have felt like had I gone to the country and gotten to walk through the streets and eat some of the food and kind of get a little bit more acquainted. I just felt completely out of place, and it was a very like disembodied experience of interning. So I think that what I learned, like if you're thinking about doing a virtual internship, is that especially when it's in a place that you've never been to, in a completely different culture, I learned just to ask a lot more questions than try and like provide answers or do research that was going to have. I think I originally came in thinking, okay, like, and this is naive for any internship, but thinking like, I'm going to like make some big contribution. And I realized the biggest thing I could contribute was my outsider perspective and kind of like asking questions and saying, well, why do you guys do it this way? And kind of making them think of things in new ways. And again, really embracing that outsider perspective. But that took me a little while to become comfortable with, because I had no idea what they were talking about when they were talking about, oh yeah, at this street there was this protest or people organized here, versus if I was there, they could have taken me and shown me. So a lot of my knowledge came from descriptions rather than actually being there, and that was really hard to adjust to, and it still is a challenge for sure. But I think again that is the nature of it being virtual, and I think it's really just, instead of feeling uncomfortable with that, really embracing it and kind of seeing my completely outsider perspective can contribute something, but it's contributing questions rather than contributing answers and solutions, which I think is what we normally think of as like a satisfying outcome or output for any sort of work that you're doing. So it's just reevaluating what you can contribute and how you can contribute.
That's so wise, Karina. Yeah. I'm curious. Gosh, we are already getting towards the end of our session, but so for the four of you, what advice would kind of present day you give to the pre-experience you, who are represented by all of our attendees? Like, what would you have? What helped you make the most of your experience? What do you wish that you had done more or less of?
I can start. So I would just tell myself prior to kind of building this experience and kind of going on it, that there is a lot of ambiguity. You can't plan it all. You don't know what it's going to be like, but it's so worth it in the end. There's just so much that you don't know until you go and do it. And it's been really meaningful as an experience that I've had for even years after the actual program itself ended. So I know it takes a lot of planning. You have to take a lot of initiative to make sure that you can still graduate on time, that you can find the right funding, that you can find the right partners to make these programs work for you. And so it takes a lot of, I think, planning and a lot of initiative to make sure those things can happen. But in the end, it's really all worth it. And it is, I remember when I was first thinking about going abroad, you know, someone was like, you spend 8 semesters in college, and so the one you spend abroad or the summer you spend abroad, like that will be a separate memory that'll just stand alone from the rest of your UVA experience. Like, of course, UVA experience is fantastic, but this is definitely just an additional thing that I think will always kind of remain separate when you look back after you graduate. So it's just definitely really worth it.
Yeah, I think I would definitely tell myself to, one, be confident in my abilities, and two, to be adaptable, because like Jessica just said, there's always going to be a lot of ambiguity, even for a program like mine that was sort of built together as with a timeline and a cohort. But I think definitely, yeah, just sort of recognizing that, like, if you're going to do something, you're going to be put in new situations, no matter what sort of field you're working in. Like my field, for example, I'm foreign affairs and media studies. I didn't really know anything about business and business management, yet here I was going into a professional experience in those fields. And so one, taking it as a learning opportunity that I'm not sure I would have ever gotten anywhere else. And, you know, sort of taking that in stride and, you know, making the most of your time.
The big thing for me is, and was, like learning how to communicate what I needed. And I felt more hesitant to do that to begin because I was trying to be like very flexible and understanding of the whole situation. But there got to a couple of points where I was just getting like really frustrated, or, you know, didn't feel like the most supported sometimes with like my supervisor or even the person I was living with. And so learning how to like talk about those feelings in a way that was productive and not like dismissive of other people was really important for me, and a good practice in empathy. So figuring out how to like talk about things in a way that isn't not like challenging or being like aggressive. These aren't the correct words, but just finding a way to talk about what I needed was a huge part of the experience. And like after I figured out how to do that, got so much better.
Yeah, I think for me, it's going back to my answer to the last question of realizing that from a virtual setting, one of the things, like the best thing that you can contribute is questions and your curiosity. And I think in any context, but I think the virtual setting just particularly emphasizes for me is just going in, not having some predetermined, like I'm going to finish this project, or I'm going to produce X number of deliverables, and really taking it as the whole experience, and kind of letting go of any tangible expectations that you have for yourself, and instead making goals that are more focused on improvement and maybe a little bit more difficult to measure are kind of the ones that I think are the most valuable, and also the ones that are the most realistic, because at the end of the day, like everybody else said, you need flexibility and you never know how it's going to go. So I think framing your goals in terms of the type of person and the type of learning that you want to come out having done, instead of the types of tangible things that you want to accomplish, was the biggest lesson that I'd tell myself back in May.
Such nuggets of wisdom, or gold dust of wisdom. I know that we are coming close to the end of our time. I'm happy to ask one final question, but I did want to open it up to the audience to see if there were any other questions, whether if you'd like to put them in the chat or if you would like to turn your video on and ask our panelists. So I'll give a moment for that. Okay, so along the lines of continued advice, and I think, Karina, you've touched on this quite a bit, having had your experience be virtual, but with kind of the onset of uncertainty around COVID and around travel, what advice do you have for your peers who are thinking about an experience like this and trying to figure out how to prioritize whether or not to apply, or whether to wait a year and see if there's another opportunity ahead? I'm just curious what advice we'd give to your peers.
I mean, having had a virtual experience, I would say go for it. I chose to continue mine into this semester, and I think that speaks to the fact, like, I didn't have to do that. And I really enjoyed it, and I think everything's so uncertain, and I think you should embrace the opportunities that you have. And if you're interested in going abroad, and think that you have time this semester, it works with your schedule, I would totally take this experience, because even if it's not the picturesque study abroad that you imagined, I think it is extremely valuable, and it's a way to connect globally during this time when I think that those options are quite limited. And it's a very unique experience, even if it's not what you imagined. And I highly recommend it to anybody.
Well said, Karina. I think that that is a wonderful kind of note to end on. Ingrid, I don't know if you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, I know it's a frustrating and challenging time. You can have these motivations to want to go abroad and have these experiences, but you just have to kind of wait and see what happens. But I would just say that frustration and that wanting to go, it's a generative impulse. It's a good thing to continue to cultivate. There's still so many classes at UVA you can take. Relationships that you can cultivate even virtually, and so I just say keep it in mind, keep talking to people, keep talking to us. Everybody is wanting to see you have these experiences sooner or later. So yeah.
Agreed. Well, I think we will all give our panelists a virtual round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was, I mean, an excellent lineup of perspectives. And again, you all shared such wisdom and are, in many ways, the term I love to use is old souls, you know, people who have had these rich experiences. And it's clear that they've had a place, not only in your heart, but in your lives as you think about what's ahead for you. Also want to thank Ingrid for all of her hard work in bringing this team together and for sharing with you all information about the different pathways. A very big shout out to Kylie, who behind the scenes has been helping us navigate the presentation and the logistics of Zoom. And most importantly, we hope you'll keep engaging with the Global Week events. You can always visit the website, but if you have questions about some of the resources that Ingrid or I shared tonight, our website is listed here. We'll also send a follow-up with some information in it as well. So thank you all again for joining us, and we wish you all good health and a good evening.
Thank you.